Hello and welcome. My guest today is Andrij Dobriansky, Director of Communication at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Andrij, thank you so much for joining us again.
And thank you again for having me.
Politica says Trump could impose new sanctions on Russia and in the coming weeks. It feels like finally, but do we actually see any signs of that happening, or I am missing something?
Well, I think the daily news is what affects all of this. Even on Friday, as I was anticipating what news networks to talk to on Monday morning, there were some inkling that we would see further attacks in Iran and Israel. Obviously, that conflict has escalated tremendously. We now have a conversation with President Trump and President Putin in the interim. We also have political assassinations in the United States. There are so many issues that have popped up in the last few days that it seems almost a year ago, even though it was just a few days ago, when Ursula von der Leyen was speaking about negotiating with the United States a cap on fuel prices, oil prices, to be put against the Russian regime. So all of these international issues, domestic issues in the United States, other issues throughout Europe and the world, are constantly evolving, and they affect our ability to negotiate one final deal. As far as any legislation, we know that right now nothing is planning on happening until I would say July at this point, because we have already come to the point where Congress is once again, the House of Representatives is taking yet another week off. It's only the Senate who will be in Washington this week, but only for half the week, because then they have a holiday on Thursday as well. And more than likely, it will be dependent upon President Trump and his team negotiating with European leaders at the G7, which is happening while we speak, as well as I would say more likely a final resolution might happen at the NATO summit, where both the United States and the European partners can come to an agreement on what companies and what countries should be sanctioned.
So we'll come back to the Middle East, I promise. But right now, let's focus on this topic. The Telegraph reports the U.S. is stepping back from military support for Ukraine, saying it's now Europe's problem. So the headlines swing from good to bad. But isn't the bad scenario looking more and more realistic?
Well, most of the headlines from last week come from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, testifying in front of two committees of the House and two committees of the Senate. So there was plenty of time to ask him questions. In none of his prepared remarks, so in what he expected to talk about, in none of those was Ukraine mentioned. It is also true that Ukraine is not mentioned in the budget that his Defense Department proposed to Congress. However, we heard several members of Congress as well as senators ask pointed questions about Ukraine, and it is his answers, often flippant, often not directly answering the question, that have made headlines around the world. But one should also understand that he also refused to answer that the United States doesn't have war plans against Greenland. He also refused to acknowledge many basic facts about Europe when he was asked to can you identify Kaliningrad or other such landmarks. So the headlines that came out of the hearings with Pete Hegseth should be taken with a grain of salt, with the understanding that he does not have an understanding of what's going on in the future, nor is it assured that he will remain as Secretary of Defense, given the fact that members of the Republican Party as well as the Democrats have called for his resignation. So if we were to base it on the words of Pete Hegseth, then one would think that there is no possibility of future cooperation. But we know that the United States and Ukraine have secure partnerships, not just the minerals deal, two charters of strategic partnerships, as well as U.S. law that makes it very clear that the United States will assist Ukraine in the return of its occupied territories, will assist in the defense of Ukraine, as well as lead, not just sometimes attend, but lead a coalition to cooperate in defense of Ukraine as well. So there are still many things that the United States is obligated to by United States law, not just treaty with Ukraine, by United States law. And until such time as a congressman or a senator raises his hand and says, "I would like to change that law," then that will be the policy of the United States going forward.
And by the way, some European outlets say Europe is now outpacing the US in military aid to Ukraine, thanks to the UK and Nordic. Is that what Trump wanted all along?
Trump wants many things. Mostly he wants good press. But as far as what happens in Europe, we know that there has been a strategic change in European policies dating back to I believe, the 2008 Wales summit of NATO, but I'm not quite sure as far as the date. But even dating back to the Obama administration, no, it was, I believe, 2012. Even dating back to the Obama administration, NATO's obligations have been raised in terms of spending in Europe. That is 180 degrees different than what the United States wanted during the Cold War. So for over 60 years, the United States did not want to see Europe rearmed, did not want to see a strong Germany, did not want to see a strong France, did not want to see any country dominant over all of Europe. And therefore, they were perfectly happy, the United States was, in being the lead arms manufacturer, the most potent military, to be able to defend those territories. So what we've witnessed since the end of the Cold War, really, is a change to those policies, some of which include change in national policies of Europe. And that also includes the change of national policies in Japan to now start being able to hold an army of its own, which was against Japanese law for decades. So we have to take it into a context of what the United States was advocating for 60 years, and then what has slowly become the new norm of ramping up. So we can't just say this is a President Trump initiative. It is a global change in terms of priorities, in terms of defense spending.
And one more thing, what should we expect from Trump at G7? You know, Bloomberg says no drama would already be a win. Do you agree?
I agree. Again, there are so many developments both in the United States and out. We just had a political assassination here that it'll be interesting to see exactly what President Trump says at each one of his press conferences, whether that's a separate conference after the meeting with Zelensky. He also has a separate meeting with both Canada and Mexico to discuss trade and tariffs with them. So there might be another opportunity to speak with the press then, as well as we know there is the joint press conference with with G7 leaders when they're all meeting. So for me, it's less what he says, but how many conversations are held behind closed doors. It is always more effective to talk behind closed doors with President Trump, and I really hope that the European leaders who have been supporting Ukraine make it very clear how much better it is for the United States to keep supporting Ukraine in one way or another. It doesn't have to be the same way that President Biden did. It could be the way that Ukraine and Europe are asking for, which is to allow Europe to purchase weapons for Ukraine.
The next round of Ukraine-Russia talks is scheduled for after June 22. Do you think it will really happen? And more importantly, will it be productive at all?
The issue here is keep bringing up international events. We also had an international U.S. Iran summit planned for this Sunday that never happened because of the war. So you never know what might happen due to the fact that Russia might escalate with further horrible attacks. We know that just in the last 24 hours there have been civilians killed in Ukraine, double that injured. So depending on the conflict, which is daily, this is my conversation with news producers in the United States when they show pictures of Israel and the civilian bombings there. This should not be news in the United States that to see civilian buildings. We see that every day in Ukraine. So when one shows pictures of other conflicts around the world, earthquakes or what have you, we should always be including Ukraine in that as well to underscore the fact that this is an ongoing live conflict with many civilian deaths. And therefore, when we're talking about when the next discussions, diplomatic meetings are, Ukraine is fully planning on going ahead. It's just a matter of what the changes in the war might be up until that point. We never know when the next tragedy might strike.
If there is no ceasefire after round 3, do you think Ukraine has the option to walk away and blame Russia for dragging things out?
I think more than likely it'll be Russia who doesn't show up for another round after round 3. It is Ukraine who is devoted to supporting its partners, and if Ukraine's partners ask that it meet with Russia, that's what Ukraine is going to do. Ukraine's partners have no influence over Russia. It is entirely on Russia as far as when they want to meet, and therefore these meetings haven't happened that regularly. There are plenty of opportunities that could have happened before this time that Russia simply has blown off. So I believe that Ukraine is dedicated. It is to a successful conclusion to this. It is offered many times different options for securing that peace. Dating back to even the first year of the war, President Zelensky put out a 10-point plan. We've seen how dedicated Ukraine has been in organizing international summits of peace. It is really on Russia to accede to that. And unfortunately, there is no international pressure that has been able to do that. So I do hope that we see additional sanctions and restrictions coming soon.
All right. As I promised earlier, let's turn to the Middle East. What's happening in the Middle East right now? Is it hurting the momentum of Ukraine talks? Have politicians and the media shifted focus away from Ukraine?
Very much shifted the focus, but it's also the confluence of other international events. So this morning, I know that to squeeze Ukraine into a news broadcast in the United States is very difficult because of the headlines coming out of Russia, Israel, and Iran. Because of again, we had a political assassination. We also had massive protests across the United States. We had President Trump having his own parade, and now also the G7 starting. So I think the one good thing that I always thank the work of Ukraine's diplomatic corps, and especially the office of the president of Ukraine, for the fact that they were able to secure an invitation from Ukraine's partners to attend the G7. Without this meeting of Zelensky and President Trump in Canada, I don't believe that Ukraine would be in the Western news this week. Even though, as I mentioned earlier, there are daily attacks, daily civilian losses, horrible scenes that we see on the internet and that don't make it to the news broadcast in the United States. So thankfully to the efforts of Ukraine, Ukraine will be in the news this week solely because of the efforts of Ukraine's diplomats to secure this meeting with President Trump and President Zelensky. Beyond that, it'll be very tough to break through the news because of the scenes we're seeing in Israel. It reminds me very much of what we saw in the United States in the first few months of the war, the full-fledged war in 2022, when the United States was watching the scenes of rockets attack Ukraine. Here we see the same kind of ballistic missiles that have hit Ukraine daily. We see them on the screen being fired on Israel. We see civilian buildings and energy plants being targeted and blown up. All of these things will remain on American television screens for the time being. And it is possible if the war continues on a long range, just like the Ukraine war, Russia's war against Ukraine, it is possible that the United States news will then stop showing those things and they will move on to another subject.
So Trump gets an Iran that agree to a non-nuclear status, or are we heading toward a major war instead?
Well, the problem with the nuclear status, I think, is the major issue for European powers, specifically the Five Eyes nations. These are the five English-speaking nations that coordinate intelligence sharing. And I think the number one issue for any of those nations who aren't directly involved in strikes against Iran or defending Israel, the number one question is going to be who is looking at the nuclear fissile material in Iran. Is there a logistics hub for understanding just how much fissile material was in Iran to begin with? what the extent of that is after the strikes against those facilities by by Israel, and who is in charge of locking all that material up. Is it possible for terrorists of some kind to gain their hands on that equipment once that building is blown up? We know that nuclear scientists have been targeted. I guess that's a boon for the fact that none of them will be able to produce nuclear bombs for terrorists. But it is very crucial for the nuclear powers of the world to understand exactly where that nuclear material is. And I don't believe that will be a responsibility of Israel, or that Israel can do that by itself. It's focused on defending its homeland. So when Israel strikes nuclear facilities in Iran, there must be some obligation on the nuclear powers of the world to almost immediately try to understand how much nuclear material will be dispersed and how much could be possibly stolen by terrorist forces or those who would steal things to terrorists. And that is a main priority for the world right now.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Stockholm Peace Institute says the global nuclear arsenal is growing again, and the rhetoric is getting more aggressive. Is that true? Are we edging closer to a third world war?
Well, I think the closest we came was probably still during Stalin's time or during Brezhnev's time, when the rhetoric was very escalatory. But the way that fear of that was de-escalated was the fact that both sides in the Cold War worked very hard to institute a regime of inspection, and this runs counter to what I was just saying about Iran. So in the Cold War, there was a firm number of how many nuclear warheads each major power had. There was also a declaration as part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty for the nuclear powers to have an understanding of how many nuclear warheads they have and where they are, so that they can be inspected in some way. Keeping track of where this nuclear fissile material is, as well as where the warheads themselves are, is very important to stabilize the world and prevent an accidental or a more localized nuclear explosion. And that's why this situation with Iran is very difficult, because the United States and the rest of the world has never had a firm understanding of exactly how much nuclear material Iran has had. We know that just in the last month, actually at the end of May, the IAEA, International Monitoring Agency, put out a report stating that many of the restrictions put on Iran during the Obama administration deal actually didn't pan out, and that Iran was actually working towards enriching uranium at a far higher pace than was even expected. So with this lack of knowledge, I think that is what makes people scared. Not so much that there is a proliferation. Of course, we don't want nuclear proliferation. That makes a world unsteady. But if you have nuclear proliferation and a sense of inspection, that is one issue. A country that does not allow you to inspect and you have no idea how much material is out there, that frightens the world, because then you have the opportunity for that material to go on the black market.
Mm-hmm. And how does the US view AI? Is it the nuclear weapon of the future?
It is a groundbreaking difference in humanity that we just don't understand. If you talk to people in the field of AI, they are very much, those who are actively working in that field, they are very much convinced that this will be a radical change. Not just within our lifetimes, but before the 2030s, we will see a great change in the Western mode of business, of life, simply by the speed of changes that are enabled by AI being integrated into our society. On the opposite side, there are many in the defense realm who are constantly worried about how this will destroy international sets of organizations or international standards that have been mostly maintained by human-to-human interaction. The more we cede international relations or defense accommodations to AI, the more scared nations will be. So I think in general, we will see a great change. We don't know how quick that is. If you talk to the AI engineers, they will say very, very soon. If you talk to security professionals, they are hoping that this won't happen as soon, so that the world is prepared to put some standards in place to defend security arrangements from AI.
Thank you, Andrij, for joining us. It was a really pleasure to see you and hear your perspective. We truly appreciate your insight and analysis.
Thank you so much.